Hello everybody and welcome to the Still Life photo reference by Elena Tatlion. Her work is absolutely incredible. She's one of my favorite photographers. I discovered her on Instagram, so I would highly recommend checking out her work, especially if you're a lover of still life. So I'm working on the anthracite pastel matte paper here. The size is 47 centimeters by 53 centimeters, so it's kind of square-ish but not quite. Normal, starting off with my background first with some dark charcoal and kind of navy blue colors from the Terry Ludwig Dark Intense 2 set. And then working on some apricots. Now this is one, I'm going to say everything's my favorite part, but this I really did enjoy doing. I find things like glass and vases come together so nicely. All you need to do is really study that reference photograph and copy what you see, and it looks quite abstracted when you're just looking at a certain section of the glass, like you've got different reflections and a little bit of distortion of those apricots. So when you actually putting your pastel onto the paper, you're like, oh, this looks like really abstracted. But when you step away, it's like, oh, it just makes sense. So have to just keep studying that reference photograph and stepping back from your work, having a look to see how everything's looking. So I've got two references. I've got my tablet with the photograph on, and I've also got a printout of the reference right next to the easel. So it's always really close, and I'm always studying that, transferring everything I see onto my paper. So here I'm busy working on the white currants. As you can see, there's a lot of other colors that go into it besides white. We've got grays, we've got grayed yellows, we've got like peachy tones, terracotta tones, even got some like greeny olivey greens in there. So with whites, go in with an array of colors, not just white. Otherwise, you run the risk of the work looking quite flat. So even in these donuts, the white icing, I've got lilacs in there, I've got grayed down reds. There is a mass of light tones rather than just using white. You can see me use quite a few pastel pencils. They're really good to get your shapes in, to map in specific shapes, and then I come over with the soft pastels to put like stronger pigment payoff down. Because your pastel sticks, I mean, not pastel sticks, your pastel pencils are great. I mean, you can do a whole painting just with pastel pencils, absolutely, but your sticks definitely have a lot more power to them. So I always find it quite useful to go in with the pastel pencil, map in my shape, and then make the pigments and the colors stronger with the pastel stick. Oh, I loved doing the truffles. They were so much fun. Using, again, a mixture of different brands. The base of that's Terry Ludwig Extra Dark 2 set. I've got Unisons in there. We got Giro, we got Mount Vision. And you can see I'm also adding quite a lot of blue violet. So we've got our dark violet tones, our purpley, more muted blackberry kind of tones, plus some blue violet. Again, instead of putting white for the highlight, adding interesting colors and colors that are light to mid-tone light and have a beautiful blue violet tone work beautifully as highlight. Then quite a simple table we've got going on here. Nothing too fancy-pantsy because, we've got a lot going on in this piece. Here you can see me doing this golden plate. Now this was kind of tricky, I have to say. There was a lot going on in there, a lot of color change, interesting shapes. So I really had to study my reference to try and make sense of this plate. I also used quite a lot of iridescent pastels from Sennelier to get those beautiful golds, but I would only use those more as my top layers. Also, when you use the iridescence, remember to spray with fixative because you run the risk of getting that glitter particle all over the painting. And I've done that before, so now I always use a fixative. I'll do that way at the end though, and the fixative I use is the Daler-Rowney Colorless Fixative Spray, which is brilliant. It doesn't darken down the colors. it's just such a fine mist, and you build it up in soft layers. It literally doesn't change the color of your pastel painting. It's amazing. So the jug, I don't know why, but I thought this jug will come together quite quickly, because usually for me, pots, terracotta pots, glass, they come together quite nicely, quite quickly. There is a lot of detail in this jug, and it took me a long time to complete, and I kind of wasn't ready for that in some strange way. I don't know why. I thought now that I'd done the plate and, a lot of the plate, the truffle, I thought, oh, we're nearly at the end here. But this part took me a long time. Because I'm my own worst enemy, I love to move on to the next project. It's just so much fun. Anyway, so you can see I started off with the base, and it's kind of like an apricot-y, tanny, creamy base, and then I did the motif on top of that. It's just easier sometimes to work that way. Rather get your base down and then draw your motif on top. I used a lot of Giraud pastels because you can get nice thin points with the Girauds because they're so nice and thin. And they're also a soft pigment, so they will lay down a good amount of pigment versus, say, a pastel pencil. But of course, I use my pastel pencils to get the shapes in. So I just showed you a little bit of the fixative spray. It's a workable fixative called by Spectrafix that I use. Now, this was great. Doing the lace was amazing, and I was surprised because out of the whole project, the lace I was most nervous about. Just because, as you can imagine, there's a lot going on. You've got shadow from the different materials, you've got shadow from the apricots, from the jug, you've got lights, highlights, there's a lot going on. But I just followed that reference photo. I don't want to say to the exact point of every little lace bit, because that's not possible. I suppose it is, but I really don't want to do that. But I wanted to get the same vibe and the same feel. So I am studying that reference photo as closely as possible and looking at the painting to see what can I include, what do I need to exclude, what's going to make sense, what isn't going to make sense. But you can see mapping out with my pastel pencils. And I worked this part together. So I was doing the background of the table as well as the lace together. Usually, I'd work the background first, but I just decided it was too complicated to do it like that. So I'm just working. It's kind of like working in a grid form, except obviously I don't have any grid out on my painting. But I'm looking at section by section and filling out and trying to copy what I see. It's a bit tricky for me to explain. I've probably done a really bad job, but this is over on real time. So I'm chatting to you as I'm pasteling over on my Patreon. So if you wanted to check that out, I'll leave a link in the description below. But yeah, the lace just, I enjoyed it so much that on the easel at the moment, I've got another lace. It's like a room with some lace curtains, and there's a table with like a lace tablecloth. I just love doing the lace so much. So back with my little white currants, and as you can see, a base of oranges and greys. Really only using a white for the highlights. You can see I'm using my pastel pencils a lot to create these fine little stalks and the little details in the white currants. So I use a mixture of the soft pastels, the hard pastels, as well as pastel pencils. So I really liked the table had like a dark ridge, and I decided to include that because sometimes it just makes for a nice base. And then it's really nice to have that really dark strip at the bottom of the table ledge, and then you can have some light on top of the table. Still busy here with my red currants, and they've also got a little leaf on them. Also, so shadows. There's quite a lot of shadows because obviously you have a lot of objects on the table. And shadows are really important, obviously, because they ground the objects. and they can also bring a lot of interest to the painting. When doing shadows, it's remember to important the surface that the shadow is being cast on. The fact that in the shadow you're going to have a dark part and then it's going to kind of fade off. And also you can have a little bit of whatever's reflecting. So you can see in this truffle I'm busy with here, I've added a little bit of that yellow from the apricot into the shadow of the truffle. So yeah, shadow's not just one black color. There can be a lot of color in shadow too. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this, then please do hit the like button and consider subscribing. Bye for now.